My dear friend, let me tell you something right now. This ain't just another speech. This is a divine interruption. This is urgent. Because someone listening today is standing on the edge of breakthrough or breakdown. And heaven's been waiting for you to realize you are not here by accident. They said you wouldn't make it. They counted you out. But what they didn't count on was that God was counting you in. See, people only see the surface, the silence, the scars, the setbacks. But heaven saw the fight, the fire, the faith it took to rise. And now, you've become the plot twist nobody expected. You walked through fires that should have consumed you, and now you shine like someone who's been in the presence of the Holy Spirit. And now they're not just watching you, they're in awe, but you didn't get here by luck. You were led, you were refined, you were chosen. So sit up, lean in, breathe deep, because God didn't bring you this far just for you to hide. He brought you here to reveal you. Today we're going to talk about why the world is watching you now, but heaven saw you first. Before we go deeper, welcome to this moment of divine alignment. I'm inviting you to do 3 simple but powerful things. Like this video, subscribe now, and stand with this faithful movement toward 55,000 strong, and drop 777 in the comments. Heaven's signature. If you know this is your awakening, say it loud. And now, let's begin. Beloved chosen ones, if you're still here, then you already understand. This isn't just another video, another voice speaking into the void. This is an interruption from above, a divine encounter dressed in ordinary words. And if you're feeling that weight in your chest right now, that pull in your soul, it's because heaven is leaning in. God's calling you out of the shadows and into your purpose. You're not listening by accident. You're listening because you're ready. Ready to confront the truth you've always carried. Ready to stop shrinking. Ready to stop performing. And if you're truly ready, then hear me clearly. You were never lost. You were hidden, not forgotten, hidden. And when God hides you, it's not rejection, it's preservation. While they were mocking you, God was molding you. While they overlooked you, God was overseeing every detail of your breakthrough. There was a season where you were underestimated, not by chance, but by design. You were the quiet storm. You moved through life like a whisper, almost invisible to those around you. They thought you didn't know better. They assumed you were naive, unaware, oblivious. They thought they were ahead of you. But the truth is, you were never behind. You were just walking a sacred path they couldn't see. You played the fool so convincingly they believed their own illusion. You let them think they were winning. You let them underestimate your strength, your insight, your divine intelligence. You let them write your story prematurely, not realizing that God was holding the final chapter. And now that you're stepping into it, they can't handle it. You walk different. You see different. You no longer move with the hesitation of someone looking for approval. You move with the clarity of someone who's been in the presence of God. People are uncomfortable around you now, and it's not because you've become aggressive or loud. It's because your silence is no longer empty. It speaks. And what it says is unsettling. It says you're not easily manipulated anymore. It says you're not the same person they thought they could control. You used to over-explain yourself. You used to doubt your gut. You used to question your worth just to make someone else feel big. But that version of you doesn't exist anymore. You've been through too much. You've seen too much, and now you understand too much to go back to that smaller self. You figured out the patterns. You saw the projection. You discerned the manipulation. You didn't need to raise your voice to reveal the truth. You just needed time to listen, time to observe, time to step back and let God show you what was really going on. And now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's what they fear. Not your anger, not your exposure, but your clarity. They're looking at you like you're the glitch in their illusion because you were never supposed to wake up like this. You were supposed to stay confused. You were supposed to keep shrinking. You were supposed to keep needing their validation, but now you see it all. You see how they moved? You see what they said behind your back? You see how they twisted truth to make themselves feel righteous? You see the fake smiles, the half support, the conditional love. And most of all, you see yourself. You see your power. You see your resilience. You see your soul. You didn't just figure them out. You figured you out. That's the part they can't digest. Because when someone meets their own soul in the dark and comes out glowing, nothing on the outside holds power anymore. Not gossip, not judgment, not false friendships, not the whispers behind your back. You're free now. And that kind of freedom can't be faked. They feel it when you walk into a room. Your very presence carries the truth. You don't have to speak on what happened. You don't have to call anybody out. Because the truth walks with you. It lives in your eyes. It moves in your stillness. And it's louder than any noise they could ever make. You've become the lesson, a walking sermon, not because you planned it, but because you survived it. You used to be the one crying in silence. You used to be the one questioning why it had to be this way. You used to wonder if God really saw you, if he remembered you. And now here you are. Proof that he did. Proof that he never took his hand off you. Proof that heaven never stopped working behind the scenes. You were in the fire, but you didn't burn. You were in the wilderness, but you didn't die. You were broken, but you were never destroyed because something in you refused to give up. And now that same fire they tried to kill is what terrifies them. Not because you're trying to hurt anybody, but because your healed energy no longer agrees with lies, and lies don't survive long in the presence of truth. You've become the mirror, and the thing about mirrors is they don't lie, they just reflect. So when people stand near you now, they don't just see you, they see themselves, they see who they pretended to be, they see what they denied, they see what they feared. And for some that's empowering, but for others it's terrifying. Because you've become a reminder of everything they tried to suppress. A living example of what it looks like to rise from the pit and still carry peace. You didn't have to announce anything. You didn't have to get even. You didn't need revenge. Because the transformation was loud enough. The glow was bright enough. The peace was undeniable. That's what makes people stop and stare now. That's what has them whispering. That's what has them watching your every move, waiting to see if it's real. And the truth is, it is because what you carry wasn't born from ego. It was born from pain, from silence, from nights nobody knew about, from prayers that weren't pretty, from moments when you thought you'd break but didn't, from letting go of people who were never meant to stay, from choosing healing when bitterness seemed easier, from standing alone when you could have stayed accepted in circles that didn't value your soul. You're not just a survivor, you're anointed. You're not just strong, you're sacred. And that glow they're obsessed with is not makeup, it's not branding. It's the fingerprint of God on a life that refused to stay buried. You're not loud, you're clear. You're not performing, you're real. And that's why they can't stop watching. That's why they're in awe. Because somehow the one they counted out became the one that heaven raised up. You figured it out. But the truth is, it was never meant to stay hidden. This was always the plan. And now that you've stepped into the light, don't shrink, don't apologize, don't doubt it. Stand tall in your clarity. stand still in your peace. Because this chapter isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about proving God right. You were always meant to be seen, but first you had to see yourself. And now that you do, the world can't look away. Not because you asked them to, but because your truth commands it. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. That's not pride. That's presence. And you earned every drop of it. So let them whisper. Let them watch. Let them wonder how you made it through. Because the truth is simple. You were never supposed to stay silent. You were just waiting for the right moment to speak. And now your life does the talking. Your transformation does the teaching. Your peace does the preaching. And baby, they hear it loud and clear. You figured it out. And heaven knew you would. My dear friends, do you know? They mistook your silence for weakness. They mistook your sensitivity for softness. But here you are, still standing, still breathing, still becoming. See, when you've walked through a fire and you didn't get burned, there's something different about your presence. There's something unshakable about your calm, and that's what shakes them now. This is not arrogance. This is not revenge. This is resurrection. You are the stillness that disrupts every illusion. You were once the one people overlooked. You were the one who sat at the edge of the room, feeling too much, hearing too deeply, knowing things they couldn't explain. They said you were too much, too emocional, too sensitive. But that very depth they tried to shame was the soil where your wisdom grew. You weren't being dramatic, you were discerning. You weren't overreacting, you were reading what was hidden. And while they laughed, while they whispered, while they played their games, you were transforming. And now they don't know what to do with you because you didn't come back with noise. You didn't return with a speech or vengeance. You came back calm, focused, clear, and that calmness is loud. That stillness, it's shaking the rooms they walk in because nothing makes a manipulator more nervous than a soul they can no longer control. Nothing disrupts the atmosphere more than someone who no longer reacts the way they used to. You became the mirror, and the reflection is too much for them to bear. You don't even have to speak. Your energy speaks volumes. Your peace convicts. Your clarity reveals. And now those who once held the power in your life feel powerless around you because you are no longer programmable. You are no longer dependent on their validation, their approval, their presence. You grew in silence. You built in private, and when the storm came, it didn't shake you, it confirmed you. You became the person who walks through fire and doesn't smell like smoke. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's strength forged in the unseen hours. That's what happens when the soul meets the spirit, when the mind gets renewed, and when the heart no longer settles for what wounds it. They had the chance to walk with you, but they chose control. They had the chance to grow beside you, but they chose to compete. They underestimated you because they couldn't understand you. And now they mimic you from a distance. They copy your posture, your strength, your peace, but they missed the process. They skipped the fire. They avoided the pain. And now they wonder how you made it through what should have destroyed you. But you didn't just survive, you came back better. You came back with vision. You came back with discernment. You came back no longer needing to explain yourself. You are no longer hungry for being seen. You're committed to being whole. And that threatens the ones who once fed on your insecurity. It unsettles those who thrived when you doubted yourself. Because now you walk like someone who knows who they are. And the room feels it. You used to shrink yourself. You used to quiet your truth so others could stay comfortable. But not anymore. You no longer make yourself small to protect the ego of others. You are not apologizing for being wise. You are not apologizing for evolving. And no, you are not making yourself more palatable for people who only knew the previous version of you. They can either rise with you or stay behind. But you're not waiting anymore. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a spotlight. You are the evidence. Your presence is proof. You're not preaching, you're demonstrating. You're not shouting, you're becoming. You are the walking testimony of what happens when brokenness meets healing, when pain meets purpose, when rejection becomes redirection. And now you don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You just need room. Room to be, room to breathe, room to rise. There's power in your silence because your silence is no longer filled with confusion. It's filled with clarity. There's weight in your presence because your presence is no longer trying to be accepted. It's walking in truth. You don't walk into a room wondering who likes you anymore. You walk in knowing whose you are. And that confidence, that peace, that light, it cannot be faked. It cannot be bought. And it cannot be stolen. You once cried in secret. You once prayed through the pain, wondering if anyone saw you. And heaven did. Heaven saw the nights. You didn't break, the days you kept going when everything said stop. And now your comeback is not just for you, it's for the ones watching, for the ones doubting, for the ones still in the fire wondering if there's a way out. You are their reminder. You are the proof that God is still in the business of resurrection. And those who once doubted you, they feel it. They feel the shift. They may not say it out loud, but they see it. They feel your elevation. They sense your growth. And deep down, they regret choosing ego over empathy, pride over partnership. They realize now they had the chance to be part of something beautiful, but they wanted to own it. They wanted to define it, and now they only get to observe it from the outside. But don't let bitterness grow in your heart. You're not here to punish them with your progress. You're here to honor God with your healing. You're not here to be above them. You're here to rise beyond what once held you down. And sometimes the best apology is your peace. Sometimes the best closure is no explanation, just alignment, just elevation, just living the life you were always meant to live. They'll say you changed. Let them. They'll say you switched up. Let them. Because you did. You had to. You weren't built to stay wounded. You weren't created to remain in survival mode. You were called to rise, to awaken, to remember who you were before the world told you to forget. And that awakening, that scares people who only know how to relate to the old you. So walk boldly, stand firm, and know this. Your stillness is not passivity, it's power. Your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. Your peace is not denial, it's deliverance. You are not who you used to be, and you're not going back. Because the fire that should have destroyed you only revealed what couldn't be burned. And now you walk not as the one who was broken, but as the one who came back whole. You move not as the one who was betrayed, but as the one who was built. You speak not with the voice of someone needing validation, but with the presence of someone who's already been approved by God. You are the calm after the storm, the breath after the breakdown, the stillness after the chaos, and the world may not understand it, but they will feel it, because your silence, it speaks louder than ever. Your energy, it shifts atmospheres. Your life, it teaches without needing a single word. So let them wonder, let them whisper, let them watch. You're not performing anymore. You're living. You're not proving anything. You're walking in truth. And that truth, it doesn't just set you free. It makes you undeniable. My friends, now, let me tell you something real. Some people never thought you'd survive the silence. They thought if they ignored you long enough, doubted you deep enough, or broke you hard enough, you'd come crawling back begging for a seat at their crumbling table. But instead, you healed, not loud, not with revenge, not with show, quietly, powerfully, and completely. This is the continuation of the story we just told. You remember that moment when your stillness shook the room, when your calm unnerved the chaos. That wasn't the ending. That was the awakening. Because now comes the moment when you step out not needing what they never gave you. You no longer wait for their apology. You no longer seek their approval. You are no longer tethered to the wreckage they left behind. See, healing didn't come through their remorse. It came when you decided your life couldn't wait on someone else's growth. You stopped hoping they'd say, "I'm sorry." You stopped rehearsing conversations in your head trying to make them understand. You stopped bleeding just to keep the peace. Instead, you built boundaries. Instead, you reclaimed your worth. Instead, you sat with yourself and said, even if they never say it, I release them. Because I refuse to remain a prisoner in a cell whose door I now realize was always open. That kind of growth, that kind of silent strength, it rattles them. Because deep down, they expected you to need them. They thought their absence would leave you empty. But you filled yourself with purpose. You nourished yourself with truth. You clothed yourself in dignity. And the part that shakes them is that you did it all without them. You rose not because of their support, but despite their neglect. You started breathing differently, not with desperation, but with peace. And every breath you take now says something without needing to be loud. I see it clearly now. I understand what happened. I know who I was, and I know who I am. Meanwhile, they're stuck in the past version of you, still trying to speak to the wounded soul you used to be. But they don't know you've evolved. They don't know your scars became your sermons, that your silence became your stand, that your forgiveness was not weakness, it was wisdom. Because healing, real healing, is not about fixing what broke you. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be, beyond the break. You didn't need them to return and make it right, because you made it right inside yourself. You didn't need them to tell you your value, because you looked in the mirror and finally saw it for yourself. And when you did that, something inside shifted. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped chasing closure. You stopped assigning sacred energy to people who only offered you confusion. You began walking with authority, not arrogance, not bitterness, just the quiet power of someone who knows their worth now. Someone who says, I may have cried in private, but I came back crowned. I may have broken once, but I've been rebuilt with stronger material. You became the healing, not for them, for yourself. You became the answer to prayers. You forgot you whispered through tears. You became the voice that once trembled but now declares, I made it out. I found peace and I didn't wait for anyone's permission to do so. And that's where the shift happens. Not outside, not in the applause, not in the people who finally see your worth, but deep inside your soul. You stop needing their permission. You stop longing for their apology. You no longer ache for someone to say, I'm sorry I hurt you, because now you realize their absence was the apology. Their silence was the confirmation, and your survival. That was the reply. That was the echo through eternity that said, I am still here. I made it. And that truth right there, that reality where you rise without resentment, where you find peace without their closure, is the very thing that unsettles them. Because you were supposed to collapse. You were supposed to stay broken. You were supposed to remain beneath the weight of all they did, all they didn't do, all they never understood. But you didn't. And now your healing is the loudest sermon they never expected to hear. You became the healing without ever saying a word, without writing a letter, without demanding justice. You moved on. And in moving on, you took your power back. And that's why it rattles them, not because you're angry, but because you're not. Not because you want revenge, but because you want peace. And that kind of grace, oh, that kind of grace requires a strength this world rarely honors, but desperately needs. You breathe now with clarity. You walk now with clean hands. You think back to the chaos, to the confusion, to the moments that made no sense, and you whisper, thank you, God. Because even when they were trying to tear you apart, heaven was putting you back together. Every misunderstanding became a redirection. Every betrayal became a boundary. Every insult became insight. You didn't just survive the storm trained you. Those 3 storms, they didn't come to destroy you, they came to remove what was never meant to stay. They came to strip off the need to be accepted by people who never respected you. They came to dismantle the illusion that you were too much, when really you were just too real for those addicted to pretending. And once the storms cleared, you saw it. You saw how you had been trying to shrink into rooms that couldn't handle your presence. You saw how you tried to love people who hadn't yet learned to love themselves. You saw how your attempts to be agreeable were actually making you disappear. And something in you snapped, but not in rage and revelation. You finally understood that what you went through wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It was the divine disruption that forced you to outgrow your old cage. It was heaven saying, you can't stay here anymore. You're bigger than this. And so you left. Not with bitterness, but with boldness. Not with grudges, but with growth. You didn't run, you rose. Because see, the collapse of your old life wasn't the end. It was the invitation, an invitation to rebuild from a place of power, to speak from a place of truth, to love from a place of fullness. And you accepted. You picked up your pain, turned it into purpose, and walked out of the fire holding wisdom in one hand and peace in the other. Now every step you take says something. It says you didn't fold. It says you learned the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. It says you finally met yourself in the ashes and decided she was enough. She was worth the wait. She was worth the fight. She was worth the healing. And they don't know what to do with that version of you. The one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't compromise just to be chosen. You're not proving anything anymore. You're not auditioning for affection. You're not shrinking to make others feel safe. You're standing, and your standing speaks louder than any speech. You're no longer in search of healing. You are the healing. You are the quiet answer to the question, can something broken ever be whole again? You are the living proof that pain can be repurposed, that wounds can become wisdom, that silence can be sacred, that walking away can be worship. So when they say you've changed, you smile, not because you became someone else, but because you finally returned to who you were before the world taught you to hide. You're not bitter, you're just clear. You're not angry, you're just awake. And every breath you take now is not a struggle, it's a declaration. I understand now, I finally see, and I'm free. And that freedom, that sacred, unshakable, hard-won freedom is not just for you. It's for every soul still stuck, still shrinking, still begging for crumbs from tables they were called to build. You're the sign that healing is possible, that survival is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a greater one. So no, you don't need an apology. You became the answer. You became the closing line to a chapter they never finished writing. You walked out of the fire not needing their validation, not waiting on their words, because God already spoke, and what he said was final. He said you're whole. He said you're worthy. He said you're chosen. And that's enough. Beloved chosen ones, after the storms, after the silence, after the healing begins, something sacred starts to shift. You begin to feel it in your soul before it ever shows up in your surroundings. There's a recalibration happening not just around you, but within you. You're not merely surviving anymore. You're attracting. You're not just hoping anymore. You're aligned. This isn't luck. It's not coincidence. It's a divine appointment, scheduled long before the hurt, long before the rejection, long before they walked away. What you're seeing now, this emergence of strength, awareness, and power, this was always meant to be. You don't even chase anymore. You attract, and I don't mean you attract by striving, begging, manipulating, or proving. I mean you attract by alignment. Because when your mind has been renewed by fire and your spirit restored by truth and your soul has been untangled from those lies you once believed, then what belongs to you starts moving toward you. It's the law of heaven when you stop bleeding for people who never had a bandage for you, when you stop pouring into spaces that only drain you, when you stop knocking on doors that were never built for your destiny. Heaven starts releasing what's been waiting on your readiness. You see, you stopped needing permission. You stopped explaining your value. You stopped making yourself small to fit into places that were too broken to see your worth. And that shift, that silent, sacred inner shift, it sent a signal that said, I'm no longer trying to be chosen. I am chosen. You're not waiting to be picked anymore. You're walking like someone who knows they were handcrafted for this hour, this mountain, this calling. Because chosen people don't plead. They prepare, they don't chase, they carry, they don't explain, they embody, and now the timing hits. The divine convergence, the moment when your inner healing, your rising awareness, and your reclaimed energy all come together like rivers meeting at the sea. It's not chaos, it's orchestration. You start attracting the kind of people who speak the language of your growth. You enter spaces that feel like home to your healed self. Opportunities begin to locate you not because you're performing, but because you've become magnetic through alignment. Not everybody can explain it. Not everyone will understand it, but the shift is real. Because God doesn't elevate who you're pretending to be. He elevates who you become when you surrender. And right there, you start to see it. You're not operating out of desperation. You're not compromising your voice for validation. You're not negotiating your presence to be acceptable. You have learned to conserve your light. Not everyone deserves your energy. Not every room deserves your wisdom. And just because someone asks for your time doesn't mean they're ready for your truth. That discernment, that clarity, it's part of the gift that comes when heaven aligns your inner world with your divine assignment. You become a force that doesn't beg to be seen. You become a presence that heaven uses to shake things into order. That's when the right people start coming. The ones who don't feel threatened by your growth, the ones who see your scars and still speak to your destiny, the ones who know how to water without control, to cover without suffocation, to love without possession. And the beauty is you didn't find them by searching endlessly. They were assigned. They arrived at the same moment you became whole enough to receive what you used to reject. You see, when your capacity changes, so does your company. And when your alignment is right, the room you walk into will either stretch to fit your growth or tremble and fall away. That's not pride. That's discernment. You're no longer operating in cycles. You're moving in seasons. You've learned to honor what lifts you, release what wounds you, and walk away from what dims you. Because now you recognize the difference between attention and assignment, between affection and authority, between noise and the voice of God. And the more you recognize that, the less you settle. Your time is too sacred, your purpose too costly, your healing too hard won, and you've come too far to hand that over to people who only ever wanted the version of you that needed them to feel big. You've outgrown the need for applause. You've lost the taste for validation. And when heaven sees that heaven releases vision, not everyone can walk with vision. Not everyone can see where you're going. But you know now their presence is not required for your promise. You know. Now loyalty to your purpose may require loss of familiar faces. And you know now the peace that comes from alignment is far more valuable than the approval you used to crave. That's how you know you're walking in timing. Because everything around you might look the same, but everything inside of you has changed. It all starts making sense. You weren't denied. You were delayed. You weren't overlooked. You were preserved. You weren't forgotten. You were hidden until the timing matched your readiness. And now you're the one who walks into rooms not to impress but to bless. You speak with fire, not noise. You walk with clarity, not confusion. You rest without guilt. You rise without apology. You no longer need the world to approve what heaven already anointed. That's the moment you realize this isn't your comeback. This is your becoming. You were never meant to stay where you started. And now that you've stopped leaking, heaven starts pouring. So breathe it in, not just the air, but the awareness, the knowing that you are no longer a seeker of crumbs, but a steward of glory. You are no longer driven by lack, but led by legacy. And in that sacred space of clarity and conviction, you no longer chase being chosen, because now you know you are the chosen, you are the vessel, you are the answer to prayers prayed before you were born. You are not waiting to be seen. You are stepping into everything that was waiting on you to see yourself. And that's when the timing, the awareness, and the attraction all converge. That's when heaven says now, and everything you had to release, everything you had to unlearn, everything you had to survive becomes the foundation for what's about to be birthed. You don't need to knock anymore. The door is already open. You don't need to ask to be let in. You've become the invitation. And not everyone will understand how you made it this far. But heaven knew, heaven always knew. My friends. And now, as we continue walking deeper into the clarity that only heaven can bring, I want you to listen to me carefully. There comes a moment, a real shift, when something clicks in your spirit, and suddenly what used to break you no longer bends you. What used to pull at you with invisible strings of guilt, insecurity, doubt, and desperation for approval suddenly snap and fall off. And you stand there lighter, stronger, clearer. Because now you're not driven by the noise around you. You're moved by the peace within you. I'm talking about when you no longer live to be liked, you live to be aligned. You see, when your soul reaches a certain level of maturity, manipulation loses its grip on you. That's when you stop being easy prey for people who only saw your light as something they could siphon. Because now you don't need applause to know you're worthy. You don't need someone else's permission to believe in your mission. I know what it's like to feel lost in the crowd, searching for affirmation, adjusting your truth to fit someone else's comfort. But the moment you stop seeking validation from the outside world is the moment you step into invincibility. It's not arrogance. It's clarity. It's knowing who you are. Because God already told you who you are. When you no longer need their yes, you become dangerous to every system that once tried to control you. Now your value isn't negotiable. You don't discount yourself for temporary belonging. You don't dilute your vision so it doesn't intimidate others. You're no longer sitting at tables where love is conditional and respect is rationed. You've come to the place where you don't try to explain your worth to anyone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You don't justify your calling to people who never had the capacity to see it. You simply walk in it, unapologetically, quietly, consistently. Let me tell you this, family, when you operate from that space, you don't talk about your value, you demonstrate it. Your presence becomes the message. You don't have to argue or prove. Your peace speaks. Your discipline speaks. Your silence becomes louder than their opinions. That's when you know you're free. Free from manipulation, free from approval addiction, free from being defined by someone else's mirror. You are now the mirror. You reflect the truth of who God says you are. And that scares people who can't control you anymore. But you're not here to be controlled. You're here to be called, and you've answered that call. But let me go a step deeper. You know what happens when you reach this stage? You stop compromising. You stop accepting crumbs when you were made for the table. You stop letting people negotiate your standards down, because now you're not coming from emptiness. You're flowing from overflow. You know that your time is valuable. Your energy is sacred. Your future is holy ground. And that means you don't throw pearls before swine, and you don't hand access to hearts that only know how to take. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not arrogant. You're aligned. You no longer beg to be understood. You bless and keep walking. You don't shrink so others feel tall. you rise. And if they can't rise with you, you release. And that release doesn't hurt like it used to, because now you understand letting go isn't loss. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's preservation. Sometimes it's promotion. You finally get it. Not everyone was meant to come with you into this next chapter, and that's okay. You bless them, you release them, but you do not break for them. And then there's another shift, another level. One that doesn't just change how you carry yourself, it transforms the atmosphere you walk into, because now you've become the fire. The room doesn't change you, you change the room. The moment you walk in, something shifts. People feel it. Conversations stop. Some admire it, others resent it. But none can deny it. You no longer carry desperation, you carry destiny. And it shows. Your presence unsettles the insecure and inspires the awake. You're no longer tolerated, you're either respected or removed. But you're not here to be liked. You're here to be placed. You don't chase spotlight, you carry light. And that light draws what is meant for you and exposes what is not. You used to wonder why certain people walked away. Now you realize they were never meant to stand in your glow. They couldn't handle your elevation. Your clarity burned their confusion. Your peace convicted their chaos. Now listen to me. When you become that person, when you walk with that kind of stillness and power, don't be surprised when people try to dim your light, not because you've done something wrong, but because your light reminds them of the darkness they've accepted. But that's not your concern. You're not here to manage their comfort, you're here to obey your calling. So don't dim it, don't water it down, don't explain it away. Let your fire burn, let your glow speak. Let your obedience shine. You no longer need the applause of the room when you know heaven is already standing for you. When your assignment is clear, your spirit is untouchable. That's the power of walking in alignment with God's voice, not their opinions. That's what it means to step into authority. To live from the inside out, to be unmoved, unbothered, and unshakable. Not because of ego, but because of intimacy with the Father. This is who you are becoming. And this is only the beginning. You see, when you finally understand your worth, you don't have to announce it. You don't need to wave it around like a banner begging people to take notice. You walk into the room and the atmosphere shifts, not because you demand attention, but because your spirit commands it. It's the kind of presence that silences noise without speaking. And people feel it. They don't always understand it, and that's okay. Because your value no longer depends on their comprehension. Your confidence doesn't need consensus. Your soul isn't up for negotiation. There was a time you would have twisted yourself into knots to be accepted, bent your back to carry loads that were never yours, watered yourself down to avoid making others uncomfortable. But those days are gone. That season has ended, because when God elevates you, He doesn't just change your situation, He transforms your posture. Now, you don't lower your standards to be approachable. You stand firm in who you are, and the right ones will rise to meet you. You don't need a spotlight. You are the light. And wherever you go, the space responds. Some rooms get brighter because your energy ignites dormant hope. Some rooms grow colder because your clarity exposes confusion. Some people lean in with reverence, others recoil in jealousy. But either way, you keep standing, because your purpose is not to please, it's to shine. And that's what people don't understand. They think confidence is arrogance because they've never seen someone own themselves without apology. They mistake conviction for pride because they've been taught humility means shrinking. But real humility is standing tall while knowing it's God who built your spine. And when you walk like that, when you move in that anointing, manipulation loses its grip. No more strings. No more guilt trips. No more letting someone else's insecurity define your limits. You don't chase explanations. You don't beg to be understood. You don't apologize for what God put in you. because you know now you were never too much, you were never too intense, you were never too ambitious. You were just in the wrong atmosphere. But now you found your fire. And when you're on fire, it's no surprise. Some people try to throw water. It's not personal, it's spiritual. The enemy doesn't attack what isn't threatening. You've become the kind of person who can't be swayed by flattery nor wounded by silence. You don't panic when someone walks away. You bless them and keep moving. Why? Because your validation comes from the only one who never leaves. You were chosen, not tolerated, not temporarily admired, chosen. That word alone dismantles every lie you used to believe about your worth. You are chosen, and you are dangerous to the darkness because of it. You're not trying to change people's minds anymore. You're changing atmospheres. You're not explaining your evolution to people who never wanted you to grow. You're embracing the evidence of God's fingerprints on your life. And when they look at you now, they might not recognize who you've become, and that's the point. You didn't survive the fire to remain the same. You were refined, molded, purified. You don't just carry light now, you are the reflection of the light. And that light attracts and exposes. So don't be surprised when some people try to dim it. But let me tell you something, don't shrink, because this world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs more people who stand up, who speak truth, who walk in grace and power at the same time. That's who you are now. You've become magnetic, but not because you're performing. You're magnetic because you're aligned. You've stopped betraying yourself for belonging. You've stopped saying yes to things that drain your soul. And guess what? That makes you unshakable. People feel it. They may not say it, but they sense it. Something's different. Your peace is louder than their chaos. Your boundaries are stronger than their pressure. Your presence reveals who they really are, and that makes them nervous. But don't take their discomfort as a sign to dim down. That tension is the sound of chains breaking. It's the sound of heaven testifying this one's been transformed. And that's what the enemy feared all along. Not just that you'd survive, but that you'd awaken. You don't need to fight for attention. You don't need to prove anything. The evidence is in your energy. The truth is in your tone. The Spirit of God that moves through you is undeniable. And even those who can't stand you can't ignore you. That's the paradox of purpose. It draws what's aligned and reveals what's not. And you don't resist either. You bless the aligned and release the rest. Because you're too focused now to entertain distractions. This season, you're in this sacred, sanctified space. It didn't come cheap. You had to unlearn people-pleasing. You had to sit in silence. You had to endure seasons of being misunderstood. But every bit of it taught you something. Your value was never up for debate. It was always secure in God's hands. And now you reflect that security in every word, every movement, every decision. So keep going. Keep shining. Not because you need recognition, but because you were built to illuminate. You don't need them to believe in you. Heaven already does. You don't need applause. You have alignment. You don't need agreement. You have anointing, and that is more than enough. If you're ready, I'll continue with the conclusion to this section where we bring this transformation to its summit and prepare the soul for what's next. Let me know. Beloved, chosen ones, let me tell you something that many of us learn the hard way. The higher you rise, the quieter your circle becomes. The more clarity you walk in, the less noise surrounds you. And as you begin to shine, really shine, not just glow with potential, but burn with purpose, you'll start to notice something. They don't clap the way they used to. They don't cheer the way they did when you were struggling. You look around and suddenly, it's not celebration, it's surveillance. See, not everybody watching is watching to support. Some are watching to study. Some are watching to copy. Some are watching to wait. And you have to know the difference. You ever had someone smile at you with their mouth but not with their eyes? They speak praises, but their posture tells another story. Not everyone that enters your life is a supporter. Some are just spectators. Some are there to borrow your fire because they lost theirs. And others, they want to study the blueprint without submitting to the process you walk through to earn it. But here's the truth. You're not bitter. You're better. You don't need applause anymore because you know the assignment. You don't require validation because you understand your value. And when you understand your value, you stop discounting yourself to gain proximity. God has taught you to discern. You don't need to fight. You don't need to confront. You just observe and adjust. Some people only came close enough to replicate, not to reciprocate. But that's all right, because what God gave you isn't just talent, it's anointing. It's not something they can steal. They can take your method, but they can't take your mantle. So now you protect your energy. You stop sharing your seed with soil that can't support it. You stop pouring into cups that only had holes at the bottom. You've learned, and you've learned well. You don't need to overshare anymore to feel seen. You don't need to broadcast every blessing to feel favored. You walk differently now. You move in silence. Not because you're scared, but because you're secure. There was a time you thought rejection was failure. You thought every closed door meant you weren't good enough. You blamed yourself for not fitting in, not being chosen, not being embraced by rooms you thought you were called to. But what if I told you you were never being rejected? You were being prepared. God didn't let them accept you because He was preparing something bigger. Those closed doors, they were classrooms. Those cold shoulders, they were conditions for refinement. That silence you endured, it wasn't abandonment. It was alignment. He was building you in the dark so your light could last. He was strengthening your spine so you wouldn't crumble under success. Because you can't carry glory with a wounded identity. You can't steward favor with an insecure spirit. And God loves you too much to promote you before you're ready. See, success doesn't test your ambition. It tests your authenticity. And God had to make sure you wouldn't change under pressure. He had to make sure that the version of you stepping into the blessing was strong enough to sustain it. So don't mourn those no's. Don't grieve those detours. Every delay was divine. Every denial was direction. Every detour was development. You had to walk through the wilderness so you'd know how to handle the promised land. You had to experience empty so you'd appreciate full. You had to hear not yet. So when the yes came, you wouldn't make an idol out of it. Because here's the truth. When you're not ready, a blessing can crush you. But when you're prepared, you don't just receive it, you protect it. And that's where you are now. You're no longer desperate for doors to open. You're discerning whether that door leads to destiny or distraction. You're not chasing platforms. You're building foundations. You're not waiting to be picked. You've already been positioned. You're learning that silence is not a punishment. It's sacred. God speaks clearest when the world is quietest. And in that quiet place, He reminded you, your worth is not tied to applause. Your identity is not anchored in visibility, and your calling does not require consensus. You're ready now. Ready to walk into rooms without shrinking. Ready to sit at tables without compromising. Ready to lead without people pleasing. Because you know who you are. And more importantly, you know whose you are. And now you no longer waste energy proving your intentions to people who were never truly for you. Because here's the truth. When the room shifts, not everyone celebrates. Some smile, not because they're proud of you, but because they want a closer look at how you built it, how you rose, how you didn't break. They're not clapping, they're calculating. They're not fans, they're forensics. Watching every move, trying to decipher the blueprint of what God is doing in your life. But listen carefully, discernment is your armor now. You've been gifted the clarity to sense intentions beneath compliments, to hear the hunger behind the handshake. This isn't paranoia. This is protection. Not everyone who walks close means to walk with you. and not every voice in your corner is for your calling. Some are studying to imitate, not honor. Some only love you when you're accessible, not anointed. That's why this season demands that you guard your energy like it's sacred currency. Because it is. You can't afford to leak divine strategy to those who only want access, not alignment. You must move with wisdom, speak with restraint, and live in quiet power. When God begins revealing the next level of your life, it is not always the time to announce, but to protect, to water the soil in silence until the fruit speaks for itself. And hear me now, you are not being distant, you're being disciplined. You are not cold, you are called. This is not about arrogance, it's about awareness. You've learned not to entertain every table simply because there's an invitation. You don't need everyone's company, just God's covering. So you stop casting pearls before swine. You stop pouring endlessly into those who only want to sip, never serve. Because your oil is valuable. It's costly. It came through crushing through, pressing through nights where you prayed with nothing but tears in your hands. And I know there were times you felt rejected, times you thought you missed it, times when doors slammed in your face and people you would have bet your life on walked away. But let me tell you something that will shift your whole perspective. You were never being rejected. You were being refined. You were never cast aside. You were being carved into something sacred. Those denials weren't blockades, they were blueprints. God wasn't punishing you. He was preparing you. See, greatness doesn't arrive dressed in comfort. Purpose doesn't shout. It whispers through the struggle. And every no was a setup for the yes that carries the weight of your assignment. Every unanswered call, every unopened door, every unreturned favor. It was not about rejection. It was about preservation. Because God will never elevate what isn't equipped to endure. And you, my friend, were not ready then. But you are now. You had to be denied the smaller stage to be ready for the platform you didn't know was coming. You had to lose them so you could find Him. You had to cry so you could carry joy with reverence. The silence you once hated has become the sanctuary where you learn to hear God clearly. You were not waiting for a breakthrough. The breakthrough was waiting for you to become someone who could hold it without it breaking you. And now the strength you carry didn't come from applause. It was built in the absence of it. The courage you walk with wasn't inherited, it was forged in fire. The wisdom you speak with wasn't taught in classrooms, it came from moments where the only teacher was pain and the only subject was survival. You were in training the entire time and didn't even know it. God was building in you what platforms can't. He was anchoring you in a way that storms can't shake. So today you walk with the authority of someone who's been through something. You speak like someone who didn't just read about battles but bled in them. And now when people see you, they don't just see success. They see substance. They see a person who didn't just pray for the door to open but stayed faithful when every door closed. They see someone who didn't quit when it would have been easier to hide. This is why now you don't beg to be seen. You don't chase validation like it's oxygen. You don't need the crowd to clap because heaven already stood in ovation when you chose obedience over popularity. You've become someone who moves not for attention but with intention. Someone who doesn't need the whole world to approve as long as heaven is in agreement. Because you were prepared for this. Every hardship was rehearsal. Every setback, a setup. And now you step into rooms no longer seeking to belong. You know you're assigned. You walk into opportunities not to impress but to impact. And even when the spotlight dims, your fire keeps burning. Because it was never about fame. It was always about faith. And so when the crowd watches, let them. When the ones who never clap try to come close, let discernment lead. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to defend your rise. The same God who prepared you is the one who will preserve you. The same hand that lifted you will protect you. You're not stepping into blessings unprepared. You're stepping in seasoned, strengthened, and spirit-led. You're no longer shaken by shallow applause. You're rooted in sacred purpose. You've learned to see through the lens of heaven, and that, my friend, makes you unstoppable. Beloved chosen ones, there comes a moment after the silence, after the closed doors, after the isolation, when something shifts. You no longer crave the applause. You're no longer dancing for acceptance. You're not trying to belong in places that can't even hold the weight of who you truly are. You stop bending yourself to fit rooms that were never designed for your destiny. That's when it happens. That's when the mask comes off. That's when the pretending ends. You begin to live in the fullness of who God created you to be. And let me tell you something, when you take that mask off, the world doesn't see a version of you. It sees a mirror. You become a reflection of what others have hidden away. Your truth unsettles what they've buried. Your honesty shakes the lies they've learned to live with. And some people can't handle that. Some people will try to shrink you back into that mask. But baby, once you've breathed in the freedom of authenticity, there's no going back. You stop trying to entertain the expectations of the crowd. You stop apologizing for shining too brightly. You stop dimming yourself to make others feel comfortable in their shadows. You stop living for performance and you start living in purpose. And purpose doesn't play by the rules of popularity. Purpose isn't about being liked. It's about being lit, a light, a fire, a torch, not to impress, but to illuminate. See, the moment you live your truth, the world has to confront its lies. The moment you speak up, silence is exposed. The moment you choose healing, others have to confront their wounds. And don't be surprised when they resist, because you're not just walking in freedom, you're calling freedom out of others. You're not just breathing, you're reminding others that they've been suffocating. Your wholeness becomes their conviction, and that's heavy. That's why they distance themselves, not because you're wrong, but because your rightness reveals their compromise. You don't even have to say a word. Just being you fully, unapologetically, truthfully, you disrupts what they've built around their insecurity. You no longer echo their expectations. You resonate with something deeper. You're not noise anymore. You're a sound, a calling, a vibration that reminds them they were made for more. You become a revealer, not because you expose others, but because your authenticity demands theirs. That's why it's so uncomfortable to be around someone who's real, because realness is contagious. Realness is healing. Realness is revival. And revival always makes the dead things rise or run. Now, don't misunderstand me. This isn't about pride. This isn't about proving you're better than anyone else. No, this is about becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. This is about shedding the survival suit, removing the costume, peeling off the expectations, and standing in the sacred skin of who God always intended. You're not trying to impress. You're not seeking validation. You're just done hiding. And when you stop hiding something, holy happens. People don't see the role. You stop playing one. People don't see the version you've stopped editing. People don't see the fake smile you've stopped faking. They see you, the you that's been tested, the you that's been through fire and still glows, the you that knows how to lose everything and still walk in peace, the you that knows quiet strength, the you that doesn't need the mic to have impact. You didn't sign up to lead. You weren't trying to be followed, but something about your journey, something about your scars, something about your refusal to break under the weight, it speaks. It speaks louder than any sermon. It preaches in silence. It leads without title. You're not trying to lead. You just live differently. You love deeper. You carry peace like armor. You move like grace itself. And what happens? People notice, they watch, they lean in. Because in a world full of filters and facades, authenticity is rare. Because when you've been through darkness and didn't let it harden you, that softness is magnetic. You're not loud, but you're undeniable. You're not flashy, but you're unforgettable. You're not thirsty for attention, but you're overflowing with anointing. People want to know how you keep showing up when life knocked you down. They want to know how you still believe when disappointment kept visiting. They want to know how you smile without faking, how you forgive without forgetting, how you stand without straining. And here's the truth. They don't follow you because you're perfect. They follow because you're free, because you broke out of the cage, because you're walking proof that grace is real and healing is possible. And even if you never hold a microphone, even if no one ever gives you a platform, you still speak. Your life speaks, your endurance speaks, your peace speaks, your refusal to quit speaks. You don't need a stage. You are the message. You are the living letter. You are the sermon. Some people will never hear in church. And every room you enter, something shifts, not because you demand it, but because you carry it. And that's when the shift happens. That's when the mask starts to slip off. Not in shame, not in fear, but in courage. You start removing the layers the world told you to wear, the polite silence, the people-pleasing nods, the watered-down version of your fire. You stop apologizing for your presence. You stop dimming your light because others preferred your shadow. And when you do that, when you take off the mask, you confront the world with a mirror, not a performance, not a projection, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are, that truth. It rattles people. It forces them to look at what they've buried, what they've avoided, what they've denied in themselves. You're no longer trying to win approval. You've outgrown the need for permission. You're not crafting your identity for palatability. You are embracing your authenticity, and with that comes power. Not loud, attention-seeking power. No, quiet, undeniable authority. And the world doesn't always know how to handle that. Because when you stop pretending others have to question why they still are, your freedom becomes a confrontation, your joy becomes a disruption, your peace becomes a challenge. Because you didn't conform, you chose truth. And truth always shakes the room. You see, the path of the chosen one is not about climbing to the top. It's about being willing to walk through valleys without validation. You don't become a leader because you crave a title. You become one because your steps leave footprints. People can't ignore. You didn't ask to influence, but your transformation made you magnetic. You're not trying to lead. You simply can't help but blaze a trail. And in your silent obedience, you become a beacon. Not because you shout, but because your life speaks. You didn't plan to inspire others, but your scars became sermons. Your battles became blueprints. Your survival became someone else's hope. You never intended to be a symbol. But your integrity, your consistency, your perseverance, it wrote a message across your life that others began to read. You weren't looking for the spotlight, but your growth became undeniable and the world had to notice. And here's the thing, you don't have to be loud to be impactful. You don't need a stage to shift atmospheres. You don't need applause to affirm your anointing. The oil on your life doesn't need an audience. It just needs obedience. And when you live that way, real, raw, honest, the right people don't just admire you, they're awakened by you. The presence of someone who has removed the mask and chosen the path of truth shakes the room more than any performance ever could. There's something about walking in your truth that calls others higher, not because you told them to rise, but because your life revealed it was possible. And some people won't like that. Some people will resist that because your transformation exposes their stagnation. Your healing highlights their wounds. Your clarity shines light on their confusion, but that's not your burden to carry. That's not your weight to hold. Your job is not to manage other people's discomfort. Your job is to walk in truth unapologetically. And so you find yourself leading, but not by force, not by demand, But by simply showing up as you, there's power in that. There's healing in that. There's revolution in that. Because when you walk into a room without pretense, you make space for others to do the same. When you speak without a mask, others begin to listen to their own silenced voices. When you live in freedom, others realize the cage wasn't locked. They just forgot they had the key. You don't need to shout your worth. You carry it. You don't need to prove your calling. You embody it. You don't need to wear a crown. You walk like royalty because you know who sent you. And even if the world doesn't understand it, even if they whisper, question, doubt, it doesn't shake your identity, because you were not made in the image of their comfort. You were formed in the image of your Creator. And He said you were good. He said you were chosen. He said you were enough. So keep walking, keep shining, keep being that unfiltered, unashamed, spirit-led version of yourself. Because the world doesn't need another imitation, it needs your authenticity. The one that doesn't pretend, the one that doesn't shrink, the one that doesn't settle. And in doing that, you won't just live, you'll awaken. You won't just survive, you'll ignite. You won't just exist, you'll lead without even trying. That's the power of the unmasked soul. That's the light no darkness can put out. There comes a point, chosen ones, when the success that finds you is not the result of hustle. It's not the outcome of smooth talk or strategy. It's the reward of truth. You hear me? It's the evidence that you didn't sell out. You didn't trade your soul for a seat at a table. You didn't even you didn't bend. You didn't fold. You stayed rooted in what was right, even when it cost you time, attention, and applause. And now what's arriving in your life is not random. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's divine alignment. It's sacred return. It's the promise that when you stand in truth, life will eventually stand with you. You didn't chase after validation. You didn't package yourself to please the crowd. You stayed silent when flattery could have gotten you in the room. You walked away when compromise knocked too loud. And now you're being rewarded, not just with money, not just with a title, but with something deeper, something purer. You're being rewarded with peace, with people who truly see you, with timing that's not forced, but faithful. You didn't manipulate your way into favor. You matured your way into purpose. See, some people get the spotlight because they shout the loudest. You became a lighthouse because you stood the stillest. When the waves came, you didn't crash, you stood. When confusion hit, you didn't run, you grounded yourself. And now folks are looking at you, not because you marketed yourself, but because your life became a map. They're watching because you are a witness to what it looks like to be blessed without selling out, a witness to what it looks like to be elevated without ego, a witness to what it looks like to walk in favor and still keep your soul intact. You didn't have to explain your integrity. You didn't have to broadcast your decisions. You didn't need applause to feel like you mattered. The reward wasn't in the noise, it was in the quiet confirmation. That moment when the right door opened and you realized it fit, not because you forced it, but because you waited. That conversation where someone said, I don't know why, but I trust you because your spirit had already been speaking for you long before your mouth ever did. Let me tell you something. There is a richness that money can't buy. There's a wealth that has nothing to do with digits in a bank account. There's a kind of success that shows up in the way your shoulders drop at night because you ain't carrying guilt, because you didn't cheat your way there, because you didn't have to fake anything to keep it. You know what that is? That's sacred success. That's holy prosperity. That's the kind of wealth that follows people who chose to wait, to heal, to grow, and to remain real. You didn't move ahead of God. You didn't shortcut the silence. You sat in the shadows until it was your time to shine. And now the light that's on you is not the world's light. It's not artificial. It's not temporary. It's the light that comes from within. And when you walk in with that kind of light, the room shifts. Not because you demanded attention, but because your alignment speaks louder than your ambition. That's leadership. That's impact. And that's legacy. You don't need to wave your hand to be recognized. You don't have to shout to be heard. Your presence carries the weight of someone who has been through the fire and didn't come out bitter. Someone who could have broken but chose to be built. And now when storms hit others, they call you because you're the anchor. You're the evidence that stability is still possible. You're the reminder that faithfulness has a reward. You see, some people talk about strength, but you became strength. Not by flexing, but by remaining. You remained when it would have been easier to walk away. You remained when your name wasn't being celebrated. You remained when your heart was breaking and no one saw it. But heaven saw, God saw, and now heaven is honoring you in ways the world can't explain. You became a leader, not by title but by example, not by platform but by posture. Your posture in pain, your consistency in the unknown, your humility in the in-between. You didn't strive for spotlight. You cultivated stillness, and now ironically, the world can't look away. Because people are hungry for authenticity, they're tired of plastic perfection. They want real, and when you walk in the room, you carry real. That's why you're being elevated. Not because of what you can produce, but because of who you've become. You don't just do the work, you are the work. You're the evidence of what God can build when someone refuses to lose themselves in the building process. You didn't trade authenticity for opportunity, and now the opportunity is chasing you down, because purpose will always find the person who honors the process. There's a sacred kind of wealth that the world can't measure. It's not found in what you wear or what you drive or how many people know your name. It's found in peace. It's found in alignment. It's found in the quiet, knowing that you didn't compromise, you didn't shrink, and you didn't abandon yourself to chase something that wasn't real. You didn't sell your truth for a paycheck. You didn't trade your integrity for applause. That is success. That is the kind of prosperity that can't be stolen or shaken, because it was never built on the world's applause. It was built on your alignment with what is true. The success that's finding you now, it's not a coincidence. It's not luck. It's the return on your obedience. It's the harvest of every moment you chose integrity over imitation, purpose over popularity. The world may not have noticed when you walked away from shortcuts, when you said no to quick fame, when you said yes to the long road, the honest road. But heaven noticed, the universe recorded it, and now doors are opening that no man can shut. Not because you pushed your way through them, but because you waited for them to be opened by grace. People don't always understand that kind of elevation. They look for platforms, they look for position, but your life became the message. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to convince. You simply showed up in your full truth, and that light became a beacon. You became the calm in the storm. When chaos surrounded others, you were the one holding steady. You were the one grounded, the one who listened instead of reacted, the one who breathed when others panicked. That kind of strength, it doesn't come from performance, it comes from presence. And presence comes from being aligned with who you really are. You're not the loudest voice in the room, but people listen when you speak. You don't always raise your hand, but when you show up, people feel something shift. Because your presence isn't built on ego, it's built on essence. You don't need to explain who you are anymore. You're not campaigning for approval. You're not selling a version of yourself to get into rooms that weren't built for your soul. You're leading simply by being. That's divine leadership. That's what the world is hungry for, even if it doesn't know it yet. And let me tell you something, people will start to ask how you got here. They'll ask what your secret is. They'll want your formula, your strategy, your plan. But what they won't always understand is that your breakthrough didn't come from strategy, it came from surrender. You didn't get here by scheming. You got here by staying. You got here by standing your ground when it would have been easier to conform, by walking away when the cost was too high, by believing that your soul was worth protecting more than your image was worth projecting. You are a mirror now. When people meet you, they don't just see you, they see themselves. You reflect back what they're hiding from. You bring up what they've avoided. Your clarity unsettles their confusion. Your honesty disrupts their performance. And some people will be drawn to that. They'll find healing in your presence. But others will feel threatened, not because you're attacking them, but because you're exposing what they've tried to keep buried. That's the burden of truth bearers. But it's also the beauty. You're not trying to lead, but you are. You're not trying to teach, but your life is a lesson. And the most powerful part, you didn't force it, you became it. Through every trial, through every no, through every hidden season, you didn't chase the spotlight, you became the light. You didn't follow the crowd, you followed the call. And that's why now when people are searching for something real, they come looking for someone like you, someone they can trust, someone who isn't selling a fantasy but living a truth. This is what it means to be chosen, not chosen for fame or for wealth or for applause, but chosen to stand, chosen to hold the line, chosen to reflect the light when the world is surrounded by shadows. And when you carry that kind of call, you don't need to shout. Your presence speaks. Your peace testifies. Your stability in chaos tells a story all by itself. You become evidence of a higher order, proof that you can win without war, rise without rage, lead without demanding a title. So if you've been wondering why you felt so different, this is why. If you felt misunderstood, overlooked, even resisted, this is why. Because you weren't made to fit in. You were made to transform. You weren't born to imitate, you were born to awaken. And awakening doesn't always make people comfortable, but it always makes people think. It makes people confront. It makes people choose. And that's what you're doing now. Without forcing, without faking, you're calling people to choose honesty, choose healing, choose alignment. Just by living your life with truth, just by showing up with presence, just by refusing to lose your soul to gain the world. So keep walking, keep standing, keep being. The reward is already finding you, not just in what you have, but in who you've become. And there's more coming, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. And the world is starting to notice. Because you, my friend, are not just in the world, you are changing it. One breath, one choice, one truth at a time. Let them ask how you did it. Let them wonder. And when they come close enough, they'll see you didn't fake your way here. You didn't force it. You were faithful. And the fruit of that faithfulness is a life that doesn't just look good, it feels right. It carries peace. It breathes clarity. It radiates truth. This is your season, not because you chased it, but because you became it. My dear friends, we've come through the fire, we've walked through the shadows, you've taken off the mask, you've stood in your truth. And the world, it didn't fall apart like they said it would. No, it stood still. It paused. It watched. Because when a soul decides to live unfiltered, to live real, everything around it shifts. But now comes the revelation that shocks the system even more than the truth you revealed. This right here isn't the climax of your story, it's the foundation. The true beginning, what you thought was the destination, turns out was just the gate. And the key was every scar, every silent cry, every moment you stayed instead of running, every time you chose alignment over applause, You see, it all had a purpose. All the fragments, all the falls, they weren't trash. They were treasures, pieces of a divine mosaic. And now that the pieces are coming together, you start to see it, don't you? The masterpiece wasn't out there, it was in you. It's been forming in silence, being shaped in the dark. While they overlooked you, while they misread you, while they doubted you, you were becoming, and here you stand, not as someone who found their destiny, but as someone who finally realized you are the destiny. You are the fulfillment of the waiting. You are the answer to someone's prayer. And the steps you take now, they're not just your own. You walk with legacy beneath your feet. Every footstep presses down not only on the soil of the earth, but on the timeline of a generation waking up. You no longer chase a calling. You carry it. You no longer seek purpose. You are the purpose, and the magnitude of that truth, it humbles you, because you know this ain't about ego. This is about surrender. Surrender to the assignment, not the attention. You've been anointed for this, not appointed by man, but confirmed by the fire you endured. And when you walk now, you walk with clarity, with stillness, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Every battle you fought was preparation. Every no you endured was redirection, and every delay was divine design. You weren't being denied, you were being refined. And now that refinement is visible. People can't explain it, but they feel it. When you walk into the room, there's a steadiness, a peace, a spiritual authority that can't be faked. Why? Because it's not a performance, it's your presence. And that presence, my friend, is carrying weight. The kind of weight that breaks generational chains. The kind of weight that brings order to chaos. You speak, and things align not because of your voice, but because of your vibration. Because you are the proof that something holy can survive in the midst of the profane. You're the living witness that you can lose everything and still not lose yourself. And now everything is shifting. Not because you fought for the top spot, but because you trusted the deep work. You stayed faithful in the unseen. You planted in silence. And now the fruit is showing the reward. It's not fame. It's not followers. It's fulfillment. You wake up knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. That the pain didn't disqualify you. It qualified you. That your journey wasn't a detour. It was the design. And as you rise, you begin to realize you were never meant to rise alone. This rising, it's a ripple. You're pulling others up with you. You're not the end. You're the beginning of a movement. One act of courage has now become a mirror for 100 souls. One moment of alignment has activated generations of impact. So don't think for a second this is where the story ends. No, this is where it finally begins. The real story. The one where your becoming becomes someone else's belief. Where your stillness becomes someone else's strategy. Where your perseverance becomes someone else's permission to press on. Because when you said yes to the truth, you said yes for more than just you. You said yes for your bloodline. You said yes for your community. You said yes for every child watching, every weary soul listening, every heart wondering if they too can live fully awake. You didn't come this far to sit down. You didn't survive to stay silent. You came to live, to rise, to multiply the light, to be the spark for others to find their flame. This ain't the peak. It's the platform. This ain't the finale. It's the first breath. And every moment from here on, it's not borrowed. It's ordained. So walk boldly, walk wisely, walk with wonder. Because your next step isn't just history in the making, it's destiny unleashed. My dear friends, when you walk through fire and the smoke clears, people expect to see someone flawless, untouchable, like the pain never touched you. But that's not who you are. And that's not who you need to be. That's not what true leadership looks like. The world may tell you, be polished, be perfect, cover up the cracks. But let me tell you what heaven honors, what shifts the atmosphere, what brings the anointing into the room. It's not perfection, it's truth. Let's take a breath right here, because this matters. The pressure to perform, to polish yourself into someone else's image, it's crushing too many people. But tonight I'm telling you something sacred, something holy. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to be real. Because the strongest souls aren't the ones with no scars. They're the ones who kept showing up with them, who limped to the altar, who stood up in the middle of their shame, their fear, their insecurity, and said, here I am, Lord. I'm not polished, but I'm present. And that's the beginning of healing. That's the beginning of becoming. See, it's the real you that God blesses, not the mask, not the fake smile, not the curated version you post for the world to see. It's the unfiltered you. It's the version of you that's been through something, that's had to learn how to pray not just with your mouth, but with your silence. The one who's cried when nobody saw, who almost gave up but didn't. That's the you heaven recognizes. That's the you people are searching for. Because I promise you, this people are not drawn to your strength alone. They're drawn to your surrender. They're not inspired by your image. They're moved by your honesty. Your story, your real, raw, unfinished story can become someone's survival guide, but only if you stop hiding the pages. Let me say it like this. There is power in the wound that's been healed. Power in the moment. You said, I don't have it all together, but I'm still standing. Power in the moment. You stopped pretending and started owning who you are. Your story doesn't have to be tidy to be transformative. It just has to be true. Some of y'all have been waiting until you feel whole, waiting until the scars fade, waiting until you think you're good enough to step into what God called you to do. But God's not waiting on your perfection. He's waiting on your permission. He's not asking you to be flawless. He's asking you to be available. You don't need another certificate. You don't need to lose 10 pounds. You don't need to impress the world. You need to be honest. You need to be present. That's it. Show up as you are, messy, broken, healing, trying. That's how revival starts. That's how real movement begins. Through you, not your image, but your essence. And don't get it twisted. Being real doesn't mean being reckless. It means being rooted in truth, in grace, in love, in your God-given identity. It means you're no longer shape-shifting to make others comfortable. You're no longer hiding your voice because you're scared. It's too loud, too soft, too much, too little. You speak because your truth matters, because someone needs it, because silence is no longer your master. Do you know what happens when you step into your realness? You give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, a lighthouse, a shelter, not because you got everything figured out, but because you were brave enough to be seen. That's leadership. That's power. That's what makes the darkness tremble. You see, the enemy doesn't fear your image. He fears your authenticity. Because when you're real, you're dangerous. When you're real, you're untouchable. When you're real, you can't be manipulated by praise or crushed by criticism. When you're real, you're free. Somebody here tonight has been bound by the weight of expectations that don't belong to you, carrying standards that were never meant for you, trying to be a version of yourself that's palatable to everyone else, but poisonous to your own soul. That ends now, because you were not created to please the crowd. You were created to walk with power. You were not born to blend in. You were born to be a revelation, and that means being real. That means showing up with your whole heart even when your hands are shaking. Let me speak directly to that voice in your head, the one that says you're not enough. That voice is a lie. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are not too flawed. You are exactly who you need to be right here, right now, for what God has placed in your hands. And the moment you start believing that everything changes, because when you stop striving for perfection and start surrendering to truth, the burden lifts, the anxiety fades, the pressure breaks, and you start walking in peace. Not because everything's perfect, but because you're finally aligned with who you truly are. Let me leave you with this for now before we continue. The world may try to sell you a story about success that's filtered and flawless, but heaven tells a different story. A better story, one where healing looks like honesty. One where beauty looks like bravery. One where freedom looks like showing up even with your limp, even with your shadow, even with your scars. That story begins the moment you stop trying to be perfect and start being real. And so here you are, scarred, yes, flawed, absolutely, but more real, more grounded, more powerful than you've ever been. And guess what? That is your ministry. That is your mission. You don't lead people by looking like you've never struggled. You lead them because they see that you've been through hell and you came back with your soul intact. See, the world doesn't need more plastic leaders. The world doesn't need polished people with rehearsed answers and picture-perfect lives. The world is craving something that feels real, something that breathes, something that bleeds and still believes. And that something, my friend, is you. That scar on your heart, that's where your empathy was born. That loss you thought would break you, that's where your compassion grew. That divorce, that diagnosis, that debt, that depression, it didn't disqualify you, it anointed you. Because now when you speak, you don't speak from theory, you speak from survival. You speak from the ashes. You speak from the realness that can only come through the fire. And that's why people listen when you talk. That's why they pause when you enter the room. Not because you're loud, not because you're flawless, but because you carry truth in your spirit. Because they can feel that you've lived this. They can see that you didn't give up on yourself. And so maybe, just maybe, they won't give up on themselves either. There is a divine strength that comes from being unapologetically authentic, not the Instagram kind of authenticity, not the I post my pain for likes kind of real. I'm talking about the deep, quiet courage to be exactly who you are, even when no one's clapping, even when it costs you something, even when it's misunderstood. Because here's the thing, when you finally accept who you are, you stop performing, you stop hiding, you stop shrinking. And when you stop shrinking, you start taking up the space God always intended for you. You begin to move through the world in full form, no longer bending yourself to fit someone else's version of success, holiness, beauty, or power. And that kind of presence, that full, whole, present version of you is magnetic. It draws in the right people. It repels the fake ones. It confuses the enemy. And most of all, it pleases the God who made you, because God never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be honest. He asked you to come to Him broken, not brilliant. He asked you to love with your wounds, not just your wins. That's the power of grace. Grace says, I can still use you. Grace says, you're not disqualified. Grace says, bring me your mess, I'll turn it into your message. That's why you can stand tall today. Not because you got it all together, but because you've learned how to walk with your limp. You've learned how to worship with your wounds. You've learned how to lead with a limp and still bless people along the way. Some of the most powerful souls I've ever met never stood on stages. They never wrote books. They never led movements, but they were whole. They were present. They were healing everyone who walked into the same room just by being real. That's your gift. That's your glow. It's not about being the best version of what others want. It's about being the truest version of who God created. And I want to talk to somebody right now who's been delaying their destiny because they're still trying to get perfect. You think you need more time, more healing, more clarity. But what if I told you, what if the healing is in the doing What if the clarity comes when you show up as you are? What if the freedom is waiting for you to stop pretending? Listen to me, your imperfections are not liabilities. They are entry points. They are bridges that allow people to meet you in their own brokenness. When you stop hiding your pain, your presence becomes a mirror that says you're not alone. And sometimes that's all someone needs to keep going. You don't have to shine to be light. Light isn't loud. Light just shows up and reveals what's real. That's what you are now. A revealer of truth, a breaker of cycles, a living, breathing invitation to wholeness. So stop apologizing for your journey. Stop apologizing for your scars. You earned those. You lived through nights that would have swallowed other people whole. You walked through storms without an umbrella and still had the courage to dance in the rain. Don't you dare minimize that. You being alive, being real, being whole, it's already shaking things in the spirit realm. It's already breaking generational patterns. It's already opening doors that perfection never could. And here's what I know, when you show up in your truth, you give others permission to do the same. Your vulnerability becomes a key that unlocks someone else's prison. Your honesty becomes a healing balm for someone who thought no one could understand. Your voice becomes an echo that says, "Me too," to a soul that thought it was alone in the world. That's how movements start. Not with people who have it all together, but with people who are willing to show up anyway. That's how freedom spreads. That's how generations change. That's how revival is born. Not from a perfect person on a pedestal, but from a real one in the trenches. So if you've been waiting for a sign that you're ready, this is it. You are ready, not because you're flawless, but because you're faithful. Not because you're polished, but because you're present. Not because you never fell, but because you kept getting back up. And today the world needs you to stop waiting and start walking. Walk in your truth. Walk in your wounds. Walk in your worth. Because you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real. And when you are, everything begins to shift. As we come to the end of today's message, you've heard the truth. You've walked through the valley of the message, and now it's time to decide. This is not just a speech. It's not just a good word. This is a call, a divine invitation, the kind that doesn't come from man, but from the throne of God. And it's waiting for your answer. Listen to me. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to know the whole plan. You don't have to fix yourself before you move. You just have to be willing to say, "Yes, Lord, use me." That's it. That's where everything changes. Right there in your surrender. God's been speaking through every season you've survived, through every disappointment, every tear, every door that closed in your face. He was shaping you, not punishing you, preparing you, not rejecting you. So don't waste that preparation. Don't waste the pain. Don't let it just be a testimony of survival. Let it be the launching pad of transformation. You've come too far to go back, too far to settle for less. You didn't make it through the fire just to be a shadow of yourself. No, you came through the fire to shine brighter, to carry the flame. You've got something in you that this world needs, and you've got to stop hiding it. Stop apologizing for being chosen. Stop shrinking when God is trying to expand you. So I'm asking you now, will you answer the call? Will you live bold? Will you walk free? Will you stop waiting for permission and walk in the power God already put in you? Because your generation needs it. Your family needs it. The person sitting next to you might be holding on by a thread, and your obedience could be their miracle. Don't let fear tell you that you're not enough. Don't let shame convince you that your past disqualifies you. Because if God has called you, and I believe He has, then there's nothing the enemy can do to erase that. No mistake too great, no detour too long. You are not disqualified. You are destined. This is the moment to rise. This is the moment to speak, to build, to forgive, to lead, to heal, to love. You are the light, not someday right now. So stop waiting for the perfect moment. This is it. The time is now. The Spirit of the living God is knocking, not tomorrow. Today, will you let him in? Will you move? Will you carry this fire forward? Then say yes out loud. Say yes with your life. Say yes with your love. Say yes and never turn back. This is your moment. Answer it. That now you said yes, but don't just walk away with emotion. Seal it with surrender. Don't just clap. Don't just cry. Now it's time to commit. This isn't just about a feeling. It's about a foundation, a new beginning, a covenant between you and your Creator. Because what you felt in your heart just now, that fire burning, that weight lifting, that trembling inside of you that wasn't hype, that was heaven knocking. And when heaven knocks, you don't just stand there, you open the door wide. So right now, I want you to quiet everything else. I don't care who's watching. I don't care what's going on around you. Forget the noise, forget the fear, forget the guilt, forget the shame. I want you to lift your hands if you can and open your heart, because we're about to pray. Not some generic words, not some empty tradition. No, we're about to speak directly to the God who formed you in your mother's womb. The God who kept you alive when you should have been dead. The God who brought you to this moment not to condemn you, but to call you. So close your eyes, bow your head, or lift it up high. Just mean it. Just be real. Because this right here is holy ground. Let's pray. Father, God Almighty, Creator of heaven and earth, we come before you trembling not in fear, but in awe, because you didn't have to choose us, but you did. You didn't have to chase us down, but you did. You didn't have to whisper through the pain, through the chaos, through the silence, but you did. And now we're here. God, you know every story listening right now, every wound, every scar, every secret, every broken place hidden beneath the surface. You know the real us, not the version we pretend to be, but the one we cry with when the lights go off. And still, you call us beloved. Still, you say, come. So here we are, God. We're not hiding anymore. We're not running. We're not blaming. We're not covering ourselves in fig leaves of pride or perfection. We stand here bare-souled. Lord, we've tried to do this thing on our own. We've built our own plans, carried our own burdens, tried to be strong enough, smart enough, holy enough, but we can't. And we're done pretending we can. We're done trying to earn what only you can give. So now, God, we surrender. We surrender the story. We surrender the pain. We surrender the questions. We surrender our timelines and our titles and our trauma. We let go. And we pick up what you're offering instead: grace, mercy, love, forgiveness, a second chance, a third chance, a million chances, not because we deserve it, but because you're just that good. Jesus, we believe, maybe not perfectly, maybe not with 1,000 scriptures memorized, maybe not with a spotless past, but we believe, and we ask and come into our lives. Be our Savior, be our Redeemer, be our Shepherd and our strength. Be our rest when we're weary and our light when we're in the dark. Take every piece of us and make something holy out of it. We don't want a surface change. We want transformation. We want to be born again, not just in a moment, but every day forward. We want to think different, walk different, speak different, love different. We want to look like you, Jesus. Smell like grace, talk like hope, live like freedom, So help us, Holy Spirit, because we can't do it without you. Empower us to walk away from what held us. Teach us how to say no to what used to own us. Whisper truth when the enemy tries to lie again, and when we forget who we are, remind us we are chosen, we are loved, we are sealed. God, for the one who's felt forgotten, wrap them in your embrace tonight. Let them know you never left. For the one who's been stuck in shame, break the chains with the power of your blood. For the one who's battling depression, addiction, anxiety, speak life where the enemy tried to speak death. And for the one who's just tired, breathe fresh wind, Lord. Give them rest. Let them lay it down tonight and not pick it back up again. We speak peace over every storm. We speak purpose over every failure. We speak destiny over every delay. You are the author, and we trust you to finish the story. God, use us. Use these lives for more than survival. Let our testimonies become tools to build others. Let our healing become highways for those still hurting. Let our faith spark faith in our children, our friends, even our enemies. We don't just want to be blessed. We want to be a blessing. So here's our yes, all of it, a forever yes. A, through the fire, yes. A, when we don't understand, yes. A yes that costs something, a yes that changes everything. And we seal it in your name, Jesus. Now, if this is your first time praying that, if you've been far and you want to come home, if you've been numb and you want to feel again, if you've been going through the motions and you're ready for something real, then say this part with me out loud. Even if your voice shakes, Jesus, I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. And I believe you're calling me home. Today I receive your forgiveness. I accept your grace. I turn from the old and I step into the new. I give you my heart, my mind, my past, my future. I'm yours, fully and forever. In Jesus' name, amen. Now don't you walk away from this moment like it was nothing. This was everything. This was destiny colliding with decision. This was heaven touching earth. You may not feel different yet. You may not see the change tomorrow. But I promise you, the moment you said yes, eternity shifted. You are not who you were. You've just stepped into purpose. So walk like it, live like it, pray like it, love like it. And when the enemy comes knocking, you remind him, I'm not who I used to be. I'm chosen. I'm redeemed. I'm marked by God. And I will never be the same. Amen. Finally, thank you for walking with me all the way to the end of today's message. If this word has inspired you or blessed your life in any way, we humbly invite you to support the channel through a word of encouragement. Your generosity allows us to continue sharing God's message and spreading peace to those who need it most, even those who may not yet know how to ask. Your prayers, your likes, and your shares are blessings to us in ways words simply can't describe. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who may need this encouragement and truth. Your engagement helps our community grow and allows us to reach more lives with the light of God. We'd love to hear what part of today's message spoke most deeply to you in the comments. May God cover you with grace, strengthen you, and bless you in all you do.